Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. Get ready for an explosive episode. Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway. Nate Green, the award-winning CEO, founder, entrepreneur, and best-selling author, is about to drop truth bombs that'll leave you inspired, motivated, and ready to take on the world. Nate's relentless spirit and unwavering grit have propelled him from the mean streets of law enforcement to the boardrooms full of eight-figure deals. His life, it reads like an action-packed novel, crazy adventures, major setbacks, and a constant hunger for growth. As a former police officer turned business titan, Nate's unique knowledge base is a goldmine. He's not just about financial freedom. He's about launching others toward their own success. So grab your headphones, fasten your seatbelts, and join us as we dive into the mind of a true game changer. Nate Green is in the house, and this episode is about to explode. Let's get inappropriate. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 1 of the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. My name's Paul Angelle. I'm the host, and today I'm very excited to have Mr. Nate Green on our show. Nate, to keep me from having to do it, could you tell everybody where you're at, how you got there, and what do you do?
Yeah, I am here in the north side of Orlando, Florida, the Sunshine State, also the target for hurricanes, and that's beautiful right now in the hurricane season. But I got here a long time ago, back when dirt was new. My parents had me here in Florida, and I've been a Florida boy my entire life. So, and what do I do? I'm an entrepreneur that has focused a lot inside the financial arenas, and a lot of my success has come throughout my career building financial businesses, and then now into more of the coaching, consulting, and speaking, and then also being an author.
You transitioned from law enforcement to entrepreneurship at one point. That to me is fascinating. So, what motivated you to make this particularly significant shift, and how did that prior experience shape your perspective?
So my life has had quite a few challenges in it, and without going too far into the challenges, when I was a cop, I would realize that I was a little unsettled. I loved taking down people. I love taking them to jail. Especially love when they fought. Man, that was like my favorite thing. The fisticuffs was just absolutely beautiful. That was my jam. But in that process, I knew that I was built for more. And so back when I was a cop, being a little unsettled, I started trying to unwind who I was and what I was built for, the core of me. And so I started doing career tests, personality tests, cognitive tests, you name it. I was trying to discover the depths of the bowels of who I was to really understand what I was built for. And so researching and walking through that, I realized that I was destined to be more of the entrepreneur side of the coin, and really destined to be inside the financial arena. So that was kind of where I set as an expertise that was scalable, had great income potential. And my plan was to work 20 years as a cop and then retire and go into the financial arenas. But I actually had heart failure at 23 years old. And that forced the transition a little bit earlier.
You just made a perfect example. Life often throws us some unexpected challenges. Could you share a specific hardship you faced during your journey and how you persevered?
So I love teaching the principles of really understanding three major factors: the core of who you are, the fuel that drives you, and then the lighthouse of what you're chasing after. And so once you dial in those three factors, and I'm not talking surface level, I'm talking about deep rooted, really understand the core, the fuel, and the lighthouse, then what happens is resilience is a byproduct. It becomes this thing where, as you're understanding those features, there's no choice but to go forward. And so, when we're talking about the different aspects, it's focus over fuel. I'm sorry, focus over feelings. Feelings are going to come, and you don't feel like going after your future. You don't feel like getting back up, but you have to. And so that's really where, when you have a focus based upon those three pieces, then continuing is just not an option to give up. So you're going to. And so in my life, I've had everything from heart failure. I was paralyzed from the waist down for a few months, not knowing if I was going to have feeling back. I went through a very awful divorce with child abuse involved, not on my side. Very difficult times. And giving up was never something that was ever an option. Why? Because I had my core, I had my fuel, and I had my lighthouse all lined up as these entire motivating factors. So now all that it required was focus action. And that was the piece that kept me moving is I knew that no matter if I felt like moving the needle forward, it wasn't about feelings, it was about that focus. And so I knew every day I had to get up and I had to keep on moving and taking practical steps to slide that little bit of a thing forward. Even if some days it only felt like an inch, some days it felt like I just couldn't let it fall backwards. And those days, despite how you felt, you have to show up and you have to take action. And, through those difficulties, we can drill into those further. But despite anything that happened in my life, man, I continue to show up. And that's what it's about.
Let's talk about scaling a business. I think you have some strong opinions on that. When you're scaling a company to 8 figures, that's not a small feat. What strategies did you employ to achieve that level of growth, and what lessons were in it? Like, what did you learn doing it?
The beginning of launching my first firm, there was this old guy, and I hate it that I can't remember his name. And I call these my Starbucks days. Back at the beginning of my business, I didn't have an office yet. I needed to get out of the office. So I went and sat at the Starbucks every single day. And I met this old guy, and me and him got to know each other a little bit. And I was talking about business. And he said, "You know what, Nate? In this process, as you're running a business, always remember people first, money will come." And we talked about this principle day in and day out for probably a week or two. And so I went back to my entire model of what I was trying to build. And I decided to focus my entire business model off of people and being there for people and helping them and providing a great value for the price and really focus on that piece. And so every business is different, but in a service-based business, especially in an intimate type business, such as, accounting or tax or financial wealth management, any of that stuff, it's a people business. And so my entire model back in 2008, when I started, was people first, money will come. And so walking through that, yes, was there times I could have billed more than I did? Yes. Is there times I should have billed more than I did? Of course. And so finding that balance was always something difficult, but focusing on people first was a massive success inside of the people business and building a business that the referrals in all of my business, I never once paid for advertisement in all those years. And keep in mind, we actually just found out 2 days ago that we placed again on the Inc. 5000 4 years consecutive. So when you're talking about the Inc. 5000 4 years consecutive without spending a dollar in advertisement, that's business growth. And that's business growth with foundation and with a platform that can scale and a platform that has solid foundation. And the beautiful thing about it is easier to sell when somebody is told that they need to use the firm that they're calling in. And so it basically our clients just become our discovery calls. They're like, "Oh man, you got to use this firm. These are the guys." And so when you have that and you have that people first mentality, your people become your entire sales agents. And next thing you know, you're just basically saying, "Hey, listen, you got a problem. Here's how we solve it. Would you like to move forward?" "Yes, let's go."
The Inc. 5000, just for my clarity, that's the fastest growing business list, right?
Yes, that is the 5,000 fastest growing companies privately owned in the United States.
Right. So it's an achievement to get on the list. But
Yes,
it's hard to repeat it because you just had a spike in growth. Then you've got to beat that. And then 4
exactly.
years in a row is monumental.
Yep. Yeah. And that's where for me, I just exited. I just sold the company back in May. And so for us to land for my last and final year, 2023, for the 2024 list is based upon 2023's revenue growth. For it to be not only my last year as CEO, but the fourth consecutive year, For me, it was just like that final hurrah that's like, you know what, this is it. Because every year you're putting down so many numbers and so much growth. And then you're chasing your tail because you're like, man, I got to hit bigger numbers and bigger numbers. And now it's just all like, wow, it's pretty crazy. And so then for me, like that's when you're talking about growth and you're talking about like how you build and scale, that's how we put it down, and that's how we continue to build all of our models. And that's what, as you know, we talked about it offline. It's about relationships. Who can you connect with? How do you build those relationships? People are always first, and having an impact in people's lives and really helping people through their journey, that's really what it comes down to.
And I'm still stuck on the 4 years, because those years we're talking 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Something happened in the middle of those years that really impacted a lot of businesses, most of them not for the better. How did you maintain that level of consistent growth? How did that impact that little winning streak you had?
So there was a huge decision we had to make. Very difficult because there's a lot of firms that resisted and refused. There's a lot of support that during this trying time of 2020, where you have people that are their businesses are shut down, the world seems to be falling apart, so many unknowns. You had to choose, or I had to choose, were our firms going to really be hyper focused into and stay dedicated to people first? It is very trying on those original principles back from 2008. So 12 years later, we're faced with this. People are like, hey, PPP, what's going on with these different things? What are ERCs? What are these things? And you had the ability, or I had the ability to adjust my decision. And so could we get there and support? And if we are going to support, are we going to be like many other companies that are trying to take advantage of the situation and really kill people with huge fees? Or are we going to be here as a support in the process? As we went through this season and hearing all these needs, we actually basically created a program to support people in the original PPP process at cost. We identified what our cost was going to be, and we basically tried to just get our costs covered and then help everybody through that process. We designated a few of our employees, basically created a research team for these specific situations having to do with COVID and how the government was going to assist. And so walking through that, our profit margin in the 2020 year actually dropped for a huge season. Why? Because we were giving back so much to the community. But what happens when you give back? It always comes back. People hear about us. And then we became a support for more and more people in the community. When other firms were refusing to support, we weren't. We were on the front lines. When other firms, some of them were even shutting down because of all the changes, they couldn't keep up with it. Then we were there to support. And so it's staying true to our original model. And yes, sometimes even that process, having to go above and beyond and really focus on how do we support them and take the risk as a firm of even losing money in certain ways to continue to support. And so in there, by doing that, our growth for 2020 and 2021 were absolutely insane because of the fact of how many new clients that we were able to take on and support during that time. And so that was a big part of it, is just staying true to those core foundations, the core principles of what had gotten us to that point, and staying true to that after that.
I feel confident that achieving financial freedom is a consistent dream for most people. What advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs on building sustainable wealth while at the same time pursuing their passion?
So a lot of times they go hand in hand. In my book, Suck Less, Do Better, I talk about passions, and I talk about, is passion always necessary? And so going back to the younger version of me, do you think I was passionate about taxes and passionate about P&Ls and balance sheets? Absolutely not. I was passionate about helping people. And whether that's in law enforcement or transitioning to the financial arena. And what happens is sometimes your passions and your purpose slowly come together with the business that you're in because you have an outlet, an output. And so I used my businesses as an outlet to support people and to have an impact with people. So sometimes there is not always the direct connection about passion. And a story that I talk about in the book is also a client that I had, and he left a very high paying job, probably six, $700,000, and he decided to chase his passion inside of the fitness space. One thing he did take into consideration is the financial piece of what that would require of his family to take that massive cut. But he wanted to chase his passions, but it didn't connect to his passions on the other side of supporting his family and taking care of his family and what they looked at on this side. So, my advice to entrepreneurs is you cannot get fixated or hyper focused on one aspect of your life. You have to make sure and look at it from every perspective. When your passions get too derailed or distracted or too passionate down one pathway, you have to look at how does it balance out within your entire world. And always, I call it the inner 2 year old. You always have to go back to the inner 2 year old. Why? 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 Why do I want this? Why do I want a flashy car? Why do I want a Rolex? Why do I want to go, have 100-acre farm? Why do I want these things? And as you dig deep, you realize that some of these deep rooted fuel or driving forces inside of you really doesn't matter with this macro aspect that maybe you're trying to chase after. And as you dig in deep, then what you're looking for, the financial freedoms, or in the book I talk about different freedoms that you have, and so, or that you're chasing after. Sometimes it's freedom of relationship, and so sometimes the financial freedom is really to have relational freedom or different freedoms. And so you always have to find out those deep rooted why before you start chasing too hard down any path, whether it be financial or whether it be business or even relational. You have to be very careful and always dig down to that deepest why, that fuel that's inside of you that is really making you chase down whatever future that you're going after. Because like I deal with a lot of people like you that they're like, hey, listen, like my fuel is my family. And I'm like, well, that's great, but you're gonna have a midlife crisis. Like, period. You're gonna have one. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, okay, wait a second. So your whole goal is to provide for your family. So either you're gonna delay your success or you're gonna have a midlife crisis. Why? Because, like, you're gonna hit a lot of your goals. Your kids are gonna be off to college, and they're not gonna need you financially anymore. Your wife's gonna be good to go on her own, and she can, hey, if you die tomorrow, she's good because she has a job, most of your debt's paid off, like, so either you're gonna fail financially or your purpose is gonna burn out. And so your fuel has to go beyond all these starter elements, whether it's starter fuels or kind of like mid-level fuels. I mean, in a fire, it doesn't matter when you start all the fires with all the little stuff, then you got to put the big logs in there. And a lot of times you can't just go from the little stuff to the big logs. You got to put the medium size, and like you got to build a fire with all the different size logs and sticks and everything else. The same thing is true in your life. You got to have your starter fuel. When we talk about starter fuel, that's, hey, I'm trying to prove somebody wrong. I'm trying to compete with somebody. Those are starter fuel. It only lasts a short period. It's some of the things that might get you out of bed in the beginning. But then you realize, wait a second, like proving somebody wrong, who cares? So then as you're looking at the different layers of fuel and even your family's great. Like, provide for your family, get freedom to spend more time. That's awesome. But once again, that's only going to go so far because your kids are going to go to college and they're going to start their own families. What's next? And so then instead of have to always refill your fuel tank, you got to look at your life in a lot of different fuel cells and figure out, like, what is that fuel cell after that season starts phasing out? Like, what is your purpose afterwards? And that's why most people have these midlife crises, is because most of their driving forces only go so long. And so that's where, in my opinion, we can eliminate midlife crises, because if people have the right purpose, and the right purpose that goes beyond the halfway point in their life, then they're gonna keep on going. They're gonna keep on waking up and have this focus and this drive despite whether their kids are done with college, despite whether their daughter gets married and they have to pay for a wedding, like, no matter all these different little things, they're going to keep on going because they got greater purpose. And that's what it's all about, is chasing those greater purposes that sometimes tie into passions. And sometimes your passions lead to small incremental goals. And that's where people get so distracted with passions. Like, sometimes I'm passionate about fishing, and sometimes I'm like, I need a break from fishing. I want to go chase working out a bunch, or I'm passionate. Like, passions sometimes are futile. They're a lot of times, like, smaller. I'm passionate about having a bunch of chickens. Well, sometimes it might be like, okay, great. Like, we just had a big storm. All the chickens are dead. What do we do now? Your passion just died. like you got to have bigger purpose. And that's where, when we're talking about this, the fuel cells in your life have to go beyond that midlife side, that midlife cycle that people go through. We're talking about lifelong passion goals. What are we chasing after
Life is a crazy adventure. You would have to admit you've lived a few of those. Um,
here?
can you share an adventure that profoundly impacted your personal or professional growth?
Man, there is a lot. One thing from a financial side, let's talk about that for a second. There was a couple in my first year of business. They came to me. One was 67, the other one's 65, almost 66. And they came to me and they said, "Hey, Nate, we're really struggling financially, and we're trying to retire, but we just realized that we're not sure if we can." And we sat down and we tore through their entire life. And at that time, they weren't willing to make the sacrifices to ever be able to retire. And when I say sacrifices, it's their house was over leveraged. They taken out second mortgages and all kinds of stuff to tap it out. They had 4 cars. The 4 cars were all fully leveraged upside down. Talk about credit cards, even bankruptcy. They weren't willing to give up their house and these core things. And in those moments, seeing that point where somebody could have made so many bad decisions to get themselves to a point where they're at 65 and 67 and they were not going to be able to retire ever. That was a big moment in my life, and I was probably 24, 25, and even though I've always been a little bit of a squirrel, I've always been a little bit of a saver, and especially at that point, I had already gone through a heart problem, major traumatic events, crazy stuff. That was a moment where I talked to myself for probably the next week saying, "I'm going to work every day to never be in that position." And then I started putting major financial goals. I already had goals, but now I was making like major financial goals about, basically being able to retire by the time I was 45. Like, hey, listen, I want to have everything dialed in. By the time I'm 45, I want to work because I get to, not because I got to. And walking through that, and I love it because right now, for my life, I get to work. I hit that goal here at 40, and I love it. It's I get to show up and do these things because I want to. I get to chase it, have an impact in people's life because I want to. I got to write the book because I wanted to. I don't have to. I literally could go sit on a beach, but there is no impact waiting for me on that beach. And so when I sat with that couple and watching them, like, I'm not a crying kind of guy, but like in that moment, as they're weeping, as we're talking through things, and them saying, this is their family house, they're not willing to give it up. The husband wasn't willing to give up the cars. Like, seeing this, man, it was so sad. And like tears actually came to my eyes. But then I realized that there was so much deeper. I should not feel sorry for them. They had an entire life filled full of, I'm going to just use the word greed. They wanted the next best thing always, and they could never tell themselves no. And so, as I worked through that next phase of my life, the next few years, it was not just about financial, it was about impulse control. We all deal with an impulse control issue. It's that from that moment that says, I want, to then taking action. There should be a pause point where you process, and you should look at your lighthouse. You should look at your fuel. You should look at all these different things, these driving forces, and say, how does this line up? And so this moment taught me to exercise impulse control in every area of my life. And that became a huge turning point for me, with how I looked at money, how I looked at a lot of things, and mainly how I looked at that impulse control in those moments.
Adapting to change while staying true to your core values. I agree with you. I know that you, and everything you said today, I know that that is crucial. How do you strike the balance in your leadership journey?
Ooh,
I
the
guess I'm
leader.
curious, how did you help these people that had just not willing to help themselves?
I mean, those people at that point, that was really on early on in business. I would love to say that, we painted this great picture of a solution for them. I did have a few ideas. I gave them a few ideas. Unfortunately, they were not willing to sacrifice anything. He wasn't willing to give up his old Porsche. He wasn't willing to give up any of his cars that are all highly leveraged. There was really no way without sacrifice on their side, there was no way for them to make a change. And it wasn't like they were low income producers combined. They were making $350,000 a year, which completely blew my mind as to how they could be high income producers for so many years and still be so upside down and it be in that situation. But that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But, walking through that, but for me, after that, I have used the tools that I've learned from there and in so many different situations to really instill inside of, my teams that I've built, inside of family members, inside of whoever I can impact, and just have those conversations, have those principles about impulse control and have, the goal focus and the lighthouse and those things. And, using that in leadership and really talk about that stuff. When we talk about the core, the fuel, and the lighthouse, a lot of times like we're talking about in principle based, but what happens in leadership when I'm talking to my team, a lot of times I get to know them and get to know what's important to them. So what is the core driving forces inside of them? What is the lighthouse, like what are their goals? Like you don't really go through like a workshop tops type element with them or a keynote type, but you're just really just building a relationship. And I find myself really as I meet people, I really find myself like, hey, like, listen, like, what really gets you hungry? What gets you motivated? And I really talk to people about these three core principles just naturally. And what I love is when you're talking about in sales, then you understand what their tie downs are. Like that's what it's about. Your core and your fuel. It's you really like tie downs. Then that way, whether it's sales or whether it's relationships, you can now relate to people. And as I meet people in the airport, I mean, I pick up clients everywhere. And so as you're working there, next you get to know somebody, and you're like, man, like what are these things that are motivating you? And then you just start hearing people are always really wanting to talk about their driving forces. What is the depths of them? What are the goals they're chasing after? People are always ready and willing to talk about it. Why? Because so little amount of people are ready to listen. And so as you get to know people and you start building those things, man, I love it. And so in leadership, it's take the time to really know the people that you're leading. What is the core of who they are? What is their driving forces and in their life? What are they chasing after? And when you're talking about being able to influence the people on your team and your team as a whole, once you dial in those pieces, man, then you become unstoppable. It is amazing how when you see that and when you talk about building that relationship and building those connections, now people will do anything to support you in your mission because you are about supporting them in their mission. You tap into that fuel cell and it's like you figure out what's inside that fuel pack and it might not be the full fuel pack, but if it's a small piece and you can get them to ignite that fuel pack and burn for a little bit, man, and then once they have that and they reach that goal, that once you hit that success, then you can help them really snowball their successes. And it's like walking through and they're like, man, like I put my mind to something and we worked as a team. Now I achieved something. And it's amazing to see how that. And so when you inspire people and really get to know them, and then you pull out, wow, you're not that far away from it. It's in as a leader, you figure out how to connect the dots and build the bridge there for your team. Now they will do anything for you in that process.
Looking ahead, what legacy do you hope to leave? And what exciting goals are on your horizon?
My entire legacy, like my driving force, let's talk about that. My fuel pack. It is not, financial security anymore. That's our squared away. I got retirement. I got all this stuff's taken care of. My entire mission in life is to help people fully understand how to leverage their greatest asset, which is them, to tap into the core, the fuel, and the lighthouse. I want to have an impact where hundreds of years down the road, people will remember. I don't care if they remember who I am. I want them to remember the principles. So, this entire next phase of my journey, the whole purpose of me chasing after life and keep on moving, the entire fuel cell that is burning ridiculously hot is to make sure that I leave an impact in as many people as I can. I can change their lives. I can get on podcasts. I can write more books. I can speak as many times as I can. Why? I'm willing to sacrifice and keep on working so that I can let other people feel the same fire that I have, because now they have purpose and they understand who they are and what they're built for, because people are built for greatness. And most of the time, people can't even see it and really connect with it. And they need somebody to help open their eyes to walk through that. And I have this saying in one of my journals that says, people are waiting for me to get outside of my comfort zone, to be open and to be vulnerable, to show up for them so that I can help them become the greatest version of who they are built to be.
Let's say people listening, they want to get in touch with you. They want to talk to you. They want to work with you. They want to collaborate. They want to leave you a voicemail message. What is the best way for anyone to contact you?
So on Instagram, you can always find me. It's I am Nate Green. Pretty simple because I am Nate Green. And so it's pretty easy. If you think about it, it's not you are Nate Green. No, it's I am Nate Green. And then there's also a website, Success with Nate Green. And so that is great. A lot of these principles, a lot of the core foundation that I'm really focusing on having an impact is in my book, Suck Less, Do Better. And this is really focused on these different principles and really helping people dig through and unwind some of their holdbacks and really focus on their core, their fuel, and their lighthouse. And the book really digs deep into those, but it also talks about broken lenses, how we're not really able to see ourselves for who we are, and some of the holdbacks that we have that keep us from that. So I would challenge everybody to get the book, because the book is a great starting point. And then inside there, there's some free resources, there's a QR code, and there's a lot of great ways that we can connect and really help people in that process.
Well, that's awesome. This whole interview has been awesome. I'm really glad you joined us today. Well,
This has been great. Thank you.
to everyone watching or listening, just know that if you want to grow, chances are good you're going to have to do something inappropriate.